Somewhere in a gaming rig right now, a $900 processor is quietly killing itself. Not from a virus, not from bad luck, from the inside. Intel's own factory set instructions were telling millions of its best chips to run hotter and harder than they were ever built to survive. And the company knew. For over a year they knew, and they said nothing. By the time the truth came out, gamers were watching their PCs blue screen mid-match, then crash again, then stop booting entirely. Silicon doesn't heal. Once it degrades, it's dead. Intel had just spent a decade rebuilding its reputation as the king of desktop performance. And in about 18 months, one bad line of microcode set it on fire. This is the story of how Intel destroyed its own crown jewel and didn't tell anyone until the damage was already permanent. Rewind to 2022. Intel is under siege. AMD's Ryzen chips are eating market share, and Intel needs a knockout punch. That punch is Raptor Lake, the 13th and 14th generation core processors, led by the Core i9-13900K and its successor, the 14900K. These aren't just chips, they're flagship trophies. Intel markets them as the fastest gaming processors on the planet, and for a while they are. Reviewers love them. Benchmarks look untouchable. Intel leans hard into the marketing, bigger numbers, higher clock speeds, more cores crammed into one piece of silicon than ever before. But here's the part that matters. To hit those headline-grabbing clock speeds, Intel pushed these chips right up against the edge of what silicon can physically tolerate. The 13900K and 14900K were allowed to run at a maximum junction temperature of 100 degrees Celsius, practically boiling point for a processor. And under Intel's own performance-boosting features, the chip could pull far more voltage than it needed, chasing an extra few hundred megahertz nobody would even notice in real-world gaming. This is Intel flexing. This is arrogance dressed up as innovation. The chip becomes a bragging right until the bragging right becomes a liability. Because deep inside the processor, invisible to the naked eye, something starts going wrong. And it doesn't happen in a lab. It happens in millions of living rooms, at the exact moment users are doing the thing these chips were built for: gaming. Late 2022, the first reports trickle in. A handful of PC gamers say their systems keep crashing during matches. Random freezes, blue screens. Nobody thinks much of it. Crashes happen. Blame the graphics card, blame the RAM, blame a bad Windows update. But by 2023, the trickle becomes a flood. Gamers are reporting the exact same symptom over and over. Intel's flagship chips are randomly dying mid-session, especially in demanding titles. Game server companies start seeing it too. Their high-end Intel-powered servers are crashing under load, over and over, in a pattern too consistent to be a coincidence. And here is where Intel's fatal blind spot kicks in. Instead of sounding the alarm, Intel stays quiet. Publicly, they blame everyone else. Motherboard manufacturers get pointed at for pushing power settings too aggressively. Game developers get blamed for poorly optimized code. Users get told to check their cooling, check their RAM, check their power supply. Meanwhile, actual investigative pressure builds from outlets like Gamers Nexus and Igor's Lab, who start digging where Intel won't. By mid-2024, the truth is undeniable, and Intel is finally forced to admit what's really happening. The root cause is a flaw buried in the processor's own microcode, the low-level software baked directly into the chip. That microcode contains a broken algorithm. It's requesting elevated operating voltage even when the CPU is barely doing anything, sitting at idle, running background tasks, doing nothing that should require extra power. The chip keeps asking for more voltage than it needs, over and over, thousands of times a day, every single day the computer is on. The result is something Intel internally starts calling Vmin shift instability, a shift in the chip's minimum required operating voltage caused by repeated exposure to these unnecessary voltage spikes. Think of it like constantly redlining a car engine that was never designed to be redlined. Do it once, nothing happens. Do it every day for a year and the metal fatigues. except this isn't metal. It's silicon, wired with transistors smaller than a virus. And once those microscopic pathways degrade from sustained overvoltage, they don't recover. There's no reset button. The chip is permanently, physically damaged. Substack. Intel adds a second admission to the pile. Some early 13th gen chips also suffered a manufacturing defect, oxidation forming inside tiny internal connections during production, a flaw Intel says it discovered and fixed back in 2023, but only publicly confirmed after users forced the issue on Reddit. Two separate failures, stacked on top of each other, both traced back to Intel's own factory floor and Intel's own code, quietly present in chips that had already shipped to millions of customers for well over a year before Intel said a word. And the timeline is the damning part. The first crash reports surface in early 2023. Intel doesn't publicly acknowledge the problem until mid-2024. That's not a quick bug fix. That's roughly 18 months of silence, 18 months where every hour a customer's flagship chip stayed powered on, it kept accumulating irreversible damage. Every gaming session, every render job, every hour of use was another small step toward a chip that would eventually stop working, and Intel had the data to know it, and didn't tell the people holding the smoking gun in their own PCs. By the time Intel finally speaks, they promise a fix. A microcode patch targeted for release by mid-August 2024, designed to cap the runaway voltage requests and stop new damage from happening. But Intel has to say the quiet part out loud too. The patch cannot repair processors that are already degraded. It can only stop the bleeding going forward. For anyone whose chip had already been silently frying itself for a year, the damage is done, permanent. No software update brings dead silicon back to life. Now the cleanup begins, and it's messy. Intel extends the warranty on affected Raptor Lake chips by an extra 2 years, covering both retail and OEM versions, trying to buy back some trust with a safety net. RMA requests pour in from furious customers, some of whom say they'd already been rejected by Intel back when the company was still publicly denying anything was wrong. Class action lawsuits start stacking up, accusing Intel of selling defective processors and sitting on the truth while customers kept buying and kept frying their new chips in real time. Intel's own regulatory filings later admit the obvious. The instability crisis hurt sales volume and is expected to increase future warranty costs. But the real punishment happens in the market. Gamers do not forget, they do not forgive quietly. Through 2024, AMD's desktop market share explodes, and in the third quarter alone, AMD posts its largest quarterly gain ever recorded, a jump of 5.7 percentage points in desktop share in 3 months. Steam surveys, PC building forums, YouTube build guides, the sentiment flips almost overnight. The chip that was supposed to be Intel's proof of dominance becomes the reason an entire generation of builders stop trusting the Intel badge on principle. And unlike a stock crash you can watch recover in a quarter, this kind of damage sticks. It shows up 2 years later in market share reports still tilted toward the competitor. Here's the part that should actually keep executives up at night. This wasn't a hacker. This wasn't a supply chain attack. This wasn't bad luck. This was Intel's own engineers, chasing a bigger number on a spec sheet, pushing silicon past its limit to win a marketing war against AMD, and then staying silent for a year and a half while the evidence piled up in customer support tickets and crash reports. The chip didn't fail because it was attacked. It failed because somebody decided an extra few hundred megahertz on a benchmark chart was worth the risk. Greed doesn't always wear a suit and steal $1 billion in one dramatic heist. Sometimes it's just a company deciding silence is cheaper than a recall, right up until the silence costs them the trust of an entire generation of customers who now build with somebody else's logo on the box.